Hey gang, do you find yourself listening to your music on one app and then listening to your podcast on another app? If you do, stop this insane behavior right now and download Spotify. Spotify is home to all of your favorite music and all of your favorite podcasts. Podcasts including Fly on the Wall, the Saturday Night Live podcast with Dana Carvey and David Spade, the Rock on Tours podcast with Gary Kemp and Guy Pratt, old favorites like Fresh Air, My Favorite Murder, Wait, Don't Tell Me. Look, if you're looking for a news podcast or sports or entertainment or true crime, look, if you're looking for a sewing podcast or an RV podcast, Spotify has all of this for you. That's Spotify. All of your favorite music and all of your favorite podcasts in one place. Find it in your app store and start listening today. That's Spotify, music and podcasts. Let's get down.
You gotta open the vault.
Open my vault?
Open your vault.
Once I open the vault, it ceases to be a vault.
You have no choice.
Wait, the vault.
How did I get here from the vault? And now, here's your host, Johnny Dowdy.
All right, hello, I'm Johnny, I'm your host, and welcome to another episode of How Did I Get Here from the Vault, where we reach back into our vault of well over 1,200 episodes, pull one out, shine it up, and re-release it for you, just in case you missed it, or in case you want to hear it again, gang. Today we go all the way back to episode 536. Released on October 24th, 2016, with author Craig Dorfman, who wrote Brighter Day, a Jellyfish Story, the story of the band Jellyfish. Now, those of you that listen to the show, you know that Jellyfish is a big band for me. They were a life-changing band when their first record, Belly Button, came out. And I'm putting this out now because in March of 1993, they released their second and last album. They only released 2 albums, and that album was called Spilt Milk. So this is the 30th anniversary of the release of Spilt Milk. Jellyfish went on to tour the world one more time, started to work on a third album, and then broke up. Now, there's always been a lot of mystery about why Jellyfish broke up. What happened to Jellyfish? What happened to the drummer and singer, Andy Sturmer? What happened to him? Because we all know Roger Manning went on to start Imperial Drag. He ended up playing with Beck and playing on so many different albums. And in fact, at one point, he and I were slated to start a band together. We talked on the phone. This is the truth, because over 2020, I spoke to Roger Manning twice for the show. Once by himself and once with Tim Smith. They're both in a band called the Licorice Quartet now. That also includes Eric Dover. That wasn't Jellyfish. It's a whole Jellyfish thing. But I will be releasing those conversations in the weeks to come in celebration of Spilt Milk's 30th anniversary. Now, I want to tell you more about the book and more about Craig Dorfman. You'll hear that because I'm going to play the original intro. But let me tell you, man, Brighter Day, a Jellyfish Story is out of print. Now, I looked it up on Google. I found a couple of them on Amazon, and you can look it up yourself. They are $3,499 a piece. So, Craig Dorfman, if you're listening to this podcast again, or maybe you're checking it out, you might want to release Brighter Day, a Jellyfish Story, like put out more copies because people are dying to buy them. There's a guy selling 2 of them for $3,499 on Amazon. Now, that also reminded me to go look on my bookshelf to see where mine was. Couldn't find it, so that means I lent it to somebody. So if you're listening to this show and I lent you my copy of Brighter Day, a Jellyfish Story, I would really appreciate having it back. Please, somebody give it back because I don't have $3,500 to buy a fucking copy on Amazon. So, Craig Dorfman, release more copies. And without further ado, we're going to listen to the intro of episode 536. But this is me and Craig Dorfman talking about his book, Brighter Day, a Jellyfish Story. And we're doing this as a celebration of the 30th anniversary of the release of Spilt Milk. So episode 536, released on October 24th, 2016. This is me and Craig Dorfman. Let's get down.
How did I get here from the vault?
Let me start off by telling you a story. In 1990, I was in a band in Houston called Panjandrum, and there was a lady named Kathy Waldman from a publishing company in Los Angeles called Emerald Forest Publishing, and they were interested in our band, and they were courting our band, and in that kind of thing, you kind of talk music with these people, and you kind of develop this relationship. And I don't remember if they officed in the same building as Charisma or down the hall from Charisma Records. But she started sending me music, and she realized that I reacted to sort of like this Paisley movement. She was friends with the band Lions and Ghosts. She sent me their stuff. I really liked it. And she was like, oh, you'll like this new band that has an album coming out in a month or something, or in a few weeks. They're called Jellyfish. She sent me this cassette. It was just a burned cassette with the names of the songs on it and the name of the album, Belly Button. And I listened to it, and it changed it scratched an itch that needed to be itched, and it changed my perspective. And it made me realize that there was a style of music that I gravitated towards that I wasn't playing at the time. I was in a funk band, like in a funk rock band, not like a Chili Peppers kind of band, but like funk mixed with U2. It was weird. I don't listen to it, and I don't suggest anyone go listen to it. I don't think you can find any of it. Anyway, so Jellyfish changed my perspective. So as the years went on, I loved that band. I loved that album. And a few years later, they came out with another album called Spilt Milk. When I heard that, it totally blew my mind. Blew my mind. Seriously. So much so that the first listen through, I don't think I made it all the way through. It was overwhelming. There was so much happening. They had changed. The jellyfish from Belly Button had become a different jellyfish, a much larger jellyfish, a much more aggressive jellyfish. Still amazing lyrics, still amazing melodies, still amazing songs, but they took this thing to a new level that blew my fucking mind. So I saw them on that tour with my band at the time, Mr. Rocket Baby, my friend Billy White, and his brothers Jason and Chris White. We all went, and it was that show was life-changing. I had never seen people that good playing, at Liberty Lunch here in Austin on the Spilt Milk tour. Blew my fucking mind once again, to the point where we were talking about it years later, still talk about it. Remember that show? Remember how they went, the whole thing, the whole thing blew my mind. So as the years went on, Jellyfish broke up. And I got their albums. Roger went off and started Imperial Drag with Eric Dover, and Jason Faulkner was making solo albums. So I followed them, and I was into them, and I met a couple of them, met Jason, and at one point talked to Roger on the phone about working on a band together, met Tim Smith, and then when I was in the band Gowdy, we had a chance to choose someone to mix our record, and we chose Jack Joseph Puig, who was the co-producer and the guy that mixed both of the Jellyfish records. And I probed Jack for stories when I was in there, like, tell me about Jellyfish. What were they like? What do they? I love them. So anyway, I'm nerding out, and anyway, everyone wonders what happened. This band made 2 albums, and then they broke up and they disappeared. Well, a few weeks ago, I was on Facebook, and I'm not gonna lie, I like a couple of Jellyfish fan pages, so their stuff shows up in my newsfeed. And a book showed up called Brighter Day, a Jellyfish Story. And I was like, what? And it had a Facebook page. So I went to that Facebook page. Couldn't find where to buy it. So I wrote a private message, and I said, hi, I'm Johnny. I have a podcast. And I'm a huge Jellyfish fan. I want to read this book, and I want to talk to the author. And then lo and behold, Craig Dorfman, the man who wrote the book on Jellyfish, which is called Brighter Day, a Jellyfish Story, wrote me back. I bought a book, which you can just pay for on PayPal. So just go to the Facebook page, Brighter Day, a Jellyfish Story, and private message Craig Dorfman and ask him about the Jellyfish book. So anyway, I wrote him. I asked him to be on the podcast. I got the book. I read it, and it is amazing. It told me the story of how they got together, which I didn't know, the story of Roger and Andy, which I didn't know, and all of the writing of the records, the making of the records, the touring for the records, the switching the bandmates, what happened to these guys afterwards there's just a great ending to this story. You get to find out what happened to everyone involved in Jellyfish and where they all went and what they all did up until now. Let me just read to you from the back of the book here. Andy Sturmer and Roger Joseph Manning Jr. met as teenagers in the fall of 1980. Less than 15 years later, the two of them had won jazz contests, written commercial jingles, become pen pals, joined a band with a San Francisco new wave icon, formed their own group, sparked a major label bidding war, recorded 2 critically acclaimed records, toured the world twice, worked with a legendary producer, and backed a Beatle. In 1984, they agreed that their musical partnership, as well as their friendship, was over. They shook hands, wished each other well, and left. They have never spoken since. Drawing on dozens of interviews with all of the major and many minor characters in the Jellyfish Story to create one seamless master narrative, Brighter Day, A Jellyfish Story follows the course of that friendship from its earliest days in Pleasanton, California, through 2 decades of silence in search of the answer to the nagging question, why, oh why, isn't there more Jellyfish music? Craig Dorfman answers that question, and actually you'll find out, if you listen to this podcast, you'll find out some stuff. Maybe there's some emails going back and forth between Roger and Andy since Craig wrote this book. What? Oh, yeah. Craig Dorfman is a great guy. He did a great job of telling this story, interviewing all the people, and being able to tell one story that is so deep and so great. If you're a fan, you will eat this up. And if you don't know who Jellyfish is, listen to their music and you'll want to know their story, because it is a fantastic story. It's a sad story where guys alienated each other and built up resentment, and it was all silence until it just ended. I have a great conversation with Craig Dorfman, and he wrote a brilliant book. For a Jellyfish fan, this is a dream come true. For a person that doesn't know Jellyfish, go out and listen to their music, and you will hear a great, great, great story. All right? Enjoy my conversation via Skype with the great Craig Dorfman, my new friend. I sent him some music. Hopefully he enjoys it, and hopefully you enjoy my conversation with him. Here's my conversation with the talented and big Jellyfish fan, Craig Dorfman. Let's get down.
She turned a nightlight on and blew him a kiss. He stared back through his green Crayola eyes. She traced his likeness from off the back of the disc. Next to the box top, promised her the biggest prize. Joining a fan club with my friends.
How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm just looking for...
Hey, let me ask you a quick question before we get going. What is the main website to find the book?
Yeah,
Or do weirdos just write you on Facebook?
I mean, like, that's the most reliable
Okay.
method. Yeah, the best way to do it right now, or the best way for somebody to get information, would be to go to the Facebook page.
Okay.
Some of what we'll probably cover today is that I just signed a distribution deal.
No way. Congratulations.
Thank you. So the book, pretty shortly should be available, widely.
Okay, good.
I think not, super widely.
Right. And whatever bookstores are left, and on, is it going to come out like on a Kindle edition? Have you done an audiobook yet?
I haven't done either yet.
Okay.
I have pretty limited bandwidth to get anything done. And so at this point, I'm just trying to get the physical copies available. But eventually I'd like to get the ebook out. I've had enough inquiries that I feel like it would be worth it.
Right. All right. So let me tell you, as a Jellyfish fan and as a musician and just a guy that wondered what might have happened to Andy Sturmer afterwards, or what was going on while they were playing together, this is an amazing book.
Thank you.
You did a great job.
Thanks.
What level of nerd are you? I hang out with a bunch of pop geeks, but none of us have ever written a book.
Are we recording now? Are we in the show?
Yeah, we're in the show.
I mean, I think I'm a music fan.
I can see that behind you. There's
I'm a
wall of CDs.
So I think I'm a deep geek that way. I think I'm not the deepest of Jellyfish geeks.
Okay.
I love Jellyfish. I've loved their music, for 20 years. But there are people who really sort of breathe their, I'm not sure I could tell you the order of the songs on both records.
Okay.
Off the top of my head.
Okay.
But what I was really interested in, really excited about, was the story of that friendship. So the sort of reader in me, and I guess by extension the writer in me, was really interested to figure out, like, how does a friendship develop from, like, 14 years old to like the most peaceful but most definitive of all breakups. Like, that just struck me as so profoundly weird. That I really want. And then, as like, if you Googled it, there was the same story over and over and over, and it was, like, not very informative.
No.
And so I really wanted to get to the heart of how that friendship worked, and how it wound down so peculiarly.
Yeah. Well, you must have been some level of a fan to Google
Sure.
them and try and find out their story.
Mm-hmm.
How hard?
Absolutely.
How you did? This took 7 years.
Well, from first mention to actual book was 7 years. Yeah.
Okay.
From first effort was about 5 years.
Okay.
And in part of that, like, the good 2 years in the middle, like, I was moving from Boston to Portland, like, nothing happened in there.
Right.
So it was a 5-year project, and I sort of don't want to over romanticize it. Like, every day for 5 years, I sweated over my Jellyfish notes. And yeah, I was definitely, like, a very interested. I bought the box set when it came out, like, I was a hardcore, certainly among the more hardcore Jellyfish fans on the planet, but within Jellyfish fans, I was probably somewhere in the middle.
Okay. All right. So, how hard was it to find everyone?
It wasn't too bad.
No?
I mean, some of the, like, Roger is super easy to find.
Right.
And at least 5 years ago, he was still selling merchandise off his website.
Uh-huh.
And I had ordered, there's actually a third food cookbook CD that was never widely released, but you could buy it from Roger directly. And so I bought that, and so I had his direct email address.
Okay.
So getting him was pretty simple. And then really, like, that opens up a lot, because once I could say I'm talking to Roger, then that gives the whole thing an air of legitimacy.
Right.
And so everybody else fell pretty quickly. And then Andy, I think once Andy figured out that I was serious, like, Andy, kind of heard through the grapevine it was happening. And I think once he got the sense that I really meant business, he called me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, I had left my contact with lots of people who I, knew had access to him.
Yeah.
And, the night he called, I remember this super vividly. It was like 9-something at night. And, I was, like, getting ready for bed. My wife got in bed, and the phone rings, and she picked it up. And I'd been going for a couple months at this point. And I was like, I don't know when I'm going to get to Andy Sturmer. Like, maybe I'm going to have to write half the book and send it to him. Like, who knows what it's going to take to get him to come out from his spider hole. And,
right.
And so she picks up the phone, and she, says, hello. Yes. Can I ask who's calling? And then her eyes got really big, and she turns to me and covers the receiver and says, he says, it's Andy.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And so I, got on, like, hello. And he said, hi, it's Andy Sturmer. And,
Wow.
the thing it was as if the phone rang and somebody at the other end was like, hi, it's a unicorn.
Yeah.
It was so just totally weird. But from the very start, from that very first phone call, he was really cooperative and friendly and, honest and kind, like, very, very super easy to work with.
That's good to know.
Yeah, I think the story had been told enough times in public, and Roger and, everybody else's version had gotten some airing. I think by the time I talked to him, he was kind of ready for people like ready to let his thoughts out a little bit more. So
ready to talk about it. Enough time had passed. Water had gone under the bridge. He probably didn't get a fucking, pit in his stomach when he was talking about it anymore,
I think they all kind of did.
Yeah.
Because there's a way that, like, stuff that you think you've made peace with is really stuff that you've just found a way to get past.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't sit around most days thinking about how much I hated middle school.
Right.
But if you and I sat here talking about it for 3 hours, by the end I would be really pissed off. And feel like, I hope that fucking guy So I think, for starters, it was pretty easy conversation. And then everybody somewhere in the middle, like, had emotional moments where like just old shit got dredged up. But yeah, he was, like, even in that first conversation when he called, he started talking like right away. I still have my notes, actually, that I, like, at some point I like pulled out like a magic marker on a piece of paper and was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What an awesome experience, though.
Pretty great.
And then as you went through it, and you were catching up with all of the other, like, characters in the story, how did you find, like, offshoot people? Like, obviously, Jack Joseph Puig and Albie Galutin, these are guys, and the rest of the band guys. But I mean, outside of that, Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook. In fact, the reason I joined Facebook was to write this book. So like, that's how I got to. So when I was in Boston, I'd played a couple times with this band called Minky Starshine.
What do you play?
Drums.
Okay. Oh yeah, lousydrummer.com. Sorry.
Right. And Rob Anastasi, the main guy of Minky, had the first Minky record was produced by Ken Stringfellow of the Posies and mixed by Chris Manning.
Okay.
And so I had said to Rob, like, oh, do you have contact info for Chris? And he said, like, oh, just find him on Facebook. And I'm like, I guess I'm going to have to give in here.
Yeah. And
so a lot of contacts fell that way. Albie was actually hard to find. Because he, Albie is like an executive now at Sony Music.
Oh, he is.
But it's like the executive vice president of being Albie. Like, that's like so he just like sits in his office and like thinks up, like he invents stuff and like, thinks up interesting ideas, and then he kind of like puts it to work. And Sony backs him because they get the benefits of, like, Albie's brilliant, like, right. He's this sort of brilliant polymath. Right. And so he brings plenty of value to Sony, but there's no like if you go to the Sony website or you can't find any trace of him. And I called Sony headquarters in LA and they're like, we don't know who the hell you're talking about. Yeah, so it was sort of funny tracking him down. I eventually found him. I found somebody had his home phone number, and I called and I got his wife. He was on the road, and I said, well, I'm writing about Jellyfish, and she was like, oh, you should definitely. He'll want to talk to you. Like, that's his favorite project.
Yeah.
And she was like, here's his cell phone number. So, and that was my experience with most people, that like once I got to them, everybody was pretty eager to talk. Like that, people who touched the record and are aware of it in that way, or records, like, know that they were phenomenal, like know that they had their hands on something special, and were pretty, lots of people were sort of like, oh, finally somebody who's asking me about this thing. Right. So that was a great reward for me also, a lot of times I just had to kind of, like, if you think about it, like drilling for maple syrup, like I just had to tap the tree and everything just poured right out. Right. Right. And that, I was really lucky that way.
Yeah. I have a connection to them in a couple of different ways. And one of them is like, I guess at the time of after Eric left Imperial Drag, my lawyer at the time had been giving their A&R guy my demos, and then they got to Roger, and he and I actually had a couple of phone conversations about getting together and doing something, and it never materialized. But I got signed to Lars Ulrich's label. I was the first band that Dan McCarroll signed.
That's hilarious.
And when we did our record, we were going to mix it. We went to Jack because everyone in the band were huge Jellyfish fans, and Dan knew him and worked with him and stuff. So, and I ended up through him. I ended up meeting Jason and Tim. So yeah, I love those guys, and I've been a fan for a long time. And I've even gone and worked with people they worked with just because they worked with them. You know. Yeah, and Jack is a character. Did you get to meet him or?
I didn't meet Jack face to face. We talked on the phone a couple times.
Yeah.
I would say of the major-ish characters, he's if I had a magic wand and I could talk to one person more, it would be Jack. I didn't spend enough time with him.
Yeah.
But he's super busy.
Yeah, he always is.
And he never quite knows what his schedule is because bands will sort of just kind of, book him and then show up randomly and be like, we're ready to go.
Yeah, let's do it. So
I could never kind of schedule a time to talk with him, and I would just have to call with the recorder running, like, here we go.
Yeah.
But he's a character.
He is a character. He's like in the business of all the people that I've worked with. He's like, he has a dress. At least he did when I worked with him. He'd wear these velvet jackets with like these lace, ruffled shirts, just like this crazy kind of look at 11 in the morning at, his studio. So tell me about you real quick. Let's get some background on you. Are you a guy that's in the pop world? Are you a?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a power pop guy,
okay.
I guess. I mean, I'm a lot of things, a lot of guys, but I think, power pop is probably one of the 2 or 3 genres where my bread is buttered.
Right.
And certainly the one that I know the most, like if I was going on and, pick your subject trivia show, like that's, so, yeah, I think.
Did you grow up playing?
No.
Oh.
No, I didn't start playing until I was in my late 20s.
Oh, wow.
And, never took lessons. I mean, like, lousy drummer is not like a humble thing. Like, I suck. And it's because I'm entirely self-taught, and I taught myself when I was 28.
Right.
But I have fun. No, I grew up listening. I think growing up, it's fun. Suddenly it's turning into therapy. Growing up, I didn't feel hugely creative, and I loved music, but it never occurred to me that I could make it or write about it or and I felt like the best connection I could have was to be like a really good listener,
right?
And then. It's just one of those things. Like I also around when I was 28, I started writing professionally some and started to realize like, oh, there are stories everywhere, like in the world and in me. And as I got a little deeper into the career, I started to feel like the stories that were in the world are just waiting for somebody to find them a lot of times. And so, it was a combination of this, like being a very, I guess, enthusiastic and detailed listener, and then, a lover of stories, just story arcs, plot lines, and then feeling like some agency to tell stories and to write them down, sort of all combined to point to Jellyfish pretty quickly as a ripe topic.
Yeah. Did you do any, like, what did you do before 28? What was going on there?
That's a good question too.
It's like a missing chunk of time.
Right. There's a comedian, John Mulaney, who's like this very sort of ordinary looking white guy.
Yeah.
And he says, like I used to drink, and then he said, like, I mean, I know I don't look like a guy who used to do anything. Like I was just sitting in a room eating saltines, and then I walked out here. And that's sort of, I was teaching. I mean, like, yeah, that was my job. I was an English teacher.
Okay.
At a small, like, creative private school outside of Boston. And definitely, actually, like, that school and teaching did a lot to kind of unlock the writer in me. Like, I being there and being with all these kids who were, when I started there, the kids were weirdos. And I say that, like, as affectionately, like, in a great way. Like, I celebrate them as, and, they became like artists and filmmakers, and being around those kids, I got a different sense of what it was to be creative, because I had grown up, in this square kind of suburban upbringing. To me, creative people were like weirdos who lived in New York City and were dirty and, sucked at everything else, and were eccentric and, wear underwear and, like what it was just like that being sort of non-functional was part of creativity, and sort of being around these kids who in lots of ways were those weirdos. I sort of realized like the weirdness is another manifestation of it, but it's not that being creative is about creating things. It's about like putting things in the world where there weren't things before.
Yeah, that's exactly the words I use to describe being creative. Yeah.
And that makes it so much less threatening, because it becomes less of an identity thing and more of a like, let's try this and let's try that. And I'd say that's the point where I realized, like, I think of stories all the time. I mean, I would say I think of a dozen a day. Most of them suck, like most of them are terrible ideas, but I think my whole life they've been shooting through my head, and I always threw them out. Like, I wasn't paying attention because I didn't think that was something that I did.
Right.
If that makes sense. And then at some point I realized, like, oh, all I need to do is just like catch those things as they zoom through.
Right.
And, yeah, so that's, and then certainly teaching writing honed my skill as a writer. It made me a better editor of myself, and sort of nipped a lot of bad habits. Like now, bad habits that I used to have, I don't have anymore, because I've seen them so often in teenagers writing and have circled them on so many papers that I just don't do them. Like I sort of instinctively avoid them now.
Right. That brings a question. Did you have anyone edit this book when you finished? Or did you have to do that yourself? Or did you have friends or something?
Just sort of all of the above. I did most of the line editing I did myself. So there are a few typos still in there. And, those are the days when I was drowsy, I guess. But I had three very deliberate editors, basically. Excuse me. So one was a friend of mine who's a professional editor and a brilliant writer and a brilliant friend named Katie Guillen. And she was my sort of writing editor. I sent stuff to her and she gave me feedback on like, this is unclear. You need a transition here. Like, I don't know what the hell this sentence means. And sort of she sort of made sure that the words that I put on the page add up to a piece of writing.
Right.
Then I had a woman in Australia named J.D. O'Regan, who was in a band called Jane versus World.
Uh-huh.
And she's currently playing with Michael Carpenter in the Cuban Heels out there. But she it's worth checking out her music because it's awesome. And
heard that.
Sorry?
No. I've heard that name, the Cuban Heels.
Yeah, Michael Carpenter is like
Most recently, like very recently, someone was telling me about them.
Yeah, he's that's like kind of a project of his. He's like this kind of. He's one of those people, like he should be huge, you know, like he's just incredibly talented, really nice guy, writes these like catchy songs, plays everything.
Right.
And he's like, you know, just sort of toiling away at his studio in Australia. So JD, in addition to being a great musician, is a college professor of pop music. She wrote her PhD on Beach Boys. So I had her read it sort of as somebody who knows music and is a big Jellyfish fan. Like she was the one that I was. So the feedback I was asking for from her was, does this answer questions you have about this band?
Yeah.
Like in reading this book, do you feel like, you know, like I'm glad I read this book. It was, you know, it contributed to my fandom in a way that I want. And then the third person was actually Sarah Wirt, Andy's ex-girlfriend.
Oh, wow.
And I had her read it to sort of be like, does this look like shit that was happening as you lived it? You know, like, is this a fair representation of the world?
Right, because I bet you had to be cognizant of that, because you couldn't write that book from Andy or Roger's side.
Right. I mean, I certainly could have, but I really didn't want to.
But if you were cool and the guy that I hope you are, you wouldn't do that.
Right.
Okay.
That was, you know, that's funny. That was a big part of my early discussions with Andy, was me saying, you know, my goal is to, well, eventually there were like kind of lots of kind of phrases that I returned to with both Andy and Roger and a little bit with other folks. That I didn't want the book to get into like a he said, she said, or that basically I wanted to approach it from a point of view like everybody's experience was valid, and not like in a new agey, like everyone's experience, but
no, I know what you mean. Yeah.
But that everybody had, you know, everybody experienced it in their own way, and they processed it in their own way. And barring the, you know, as long as none of them are overtly, you know, crazy or like unhinged,
right? Then
there's important truth in all of those things, and the story, like the story, such as it is at the intersection of all those things,
right?
And actually, strike that. That's not entirely. It's not just the intersection. It's the totality of those things, because really, like, whether. You know, say what Jason was experiencing at any moment and what Andy was experiencing at the same moment. There's what was happening. There's, you know, like some sort of empirical truth,
right.
But also they were experiencing are both pieces of the story that are actually there,
right,
and actually deserve telling. And if they don't line up perfectly, it doesn't really matter, you know. And where it mattered, I tried to construct something that worked, right. Or, you know, not construct out of whole cloth.
No, I know what you mean.
So what I said a lot actually was that I saw my job as not ripping open old wounds, but explaining the map of the scars.
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah, I was really proud of that one.
Yeah.
and that made. And it was like, and it was important for me to say, because it also helped, you know, like that was a good mission statement for me, was, you know, like remembering that what I was trying to figure out is how this whole thing fits together, and not necessarily like how to wind people up, or, you know, I'm not looking to get the band back together, although like that would certainly be wonderful, or anything like that. It's really just to figure out, like, just to put the pieces together into a whole.
Yeah. Have you, and you did a great, I mean, you really did. And the way that it's laid out, and the way that there's story, the way that the things that you focused on keep the reader extremely interested. And as a fan, for me, I was getting a lot of information, and from when I work with Jack, I got all the stories about how utterly uncomfortable it was to make those records. And that was reaffirmed. And plus you got the other stories. And this is the thing that I wonder if people in bands have come to you and been like, there were times when I would be reading the story and sort of as being a guy that was a front guy and sort of the main creative guy in bands. There was one band I was in at around that same time that was a power pop band with like two main songwriters and lead singers. And he and I had that similar sort of like we were working together but not talking or hanging out. And like that same sort of thing. But I actually got an even better view of the guys that aren't the main guys, like the quote unquote drummer and bass player of a band, at least in my case, where you would see things about Jason and go like, oh shit, I feel like I was probably doing that same thing to my drummer guy then. I almost felt like calling him then and being like, I'm so sorry. But it's funny because there was a question at the end of that book I had that was like, well, I wonder if this would bring them together and there would be a point where they would play at least a one-off show or something. But that's just total like fanboy shit.
Sure. And I would say like, so the two questions that I get most often are, what does Andy look like now?
Did you say Japanese?
What?
Did you say Japanese? No, I'm joking.
No, although
I'm joking.
I might start there. And like, will there ever be more?
Right.
And the funny thing is, I don't know the answer to either of those questions. But certainly the experience was really cathartic for them, or that that's what they've said.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea what they're going to do. Definitely, like they communicated directly. Roger and Andy communicated directly for the first time and only time since 1994 in the process of this book, like sort of through me. And there was just like just an email exchange. So, there was a tiny little bit of thaw, and Roger is hugely busy and Andy is also hugely busy. And they both have things they want to be doing. And maybe one day those things will intersect. Like I'm a never say never person. But I also am not in any way planning my life around what I'll do when Jellyfish gets back together.
Right. I do know a few people that would probably fly out to LA together to go do it, including myself.
Oh, for sure. I think people would come from, worldwide.
I thought you did an amazing job of capturing what would happen to you, especially as a musician, seeing them live. Like there's not a musician that I know that saw them live that isn't a huge fucking fan that still talks about them today.
Yeah, those live shows were really something, and I'm really glad to hear you say that. Thank you. I think that was as much as I was fixated on this story of the friendship. I was also aware of Jellyfish fans and what they wanted to know. Like there are definitely folks, like I could have written 300 pages on their gear and and the mixing board.
Oh, dude, yeah.
And there are people who would have read it twice.
Yeah.
Like that's not the book that I'm capable of writing or at all. Mostly because it would bore the shit out of me.
Yeah.
But I, wanted to make sure that I wasn't just sort of talking about two guys who were friends. I wanted to find out some about those songs, and because their live shows were so extraordinary, and like you said, like the things people say about having seen them live were like these like quasi-religious experiences.
Oh,
like people
dude,
were really crazy about it. And so I wanted to try and give that some airtime and see if I could drill down and figure out a little bit like because like I've seen great bands, and I don't know that I guess a couple times, but like I don't know any of them that so consistently have left this like sort of intoxicated crowd behind them like this.
Yeah.
And so see what I could find about that.
Oh man, I remember like I live in Austin. It's a music town. I'm part of the music community. I was in a pretty popular band at the time when they came here during Spilt Milk, and we all went and saw them at Liberty Lunch. And really, it was like still people talking about that show. And like I remember the guys in my band and me going to eat after the show and just sitting there and talking about how they did this. Like in All Is Forgiven, when they do this and they back off the mics and like, oh, we got to learn how to do that. Those fucking guys have this whole thing going on, you know. Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, it's funny they didn't actually back off the mics. That was like I wonder if that did that not make the book. It's possible that didn't make the book because I got it really early on. But the rule there was stay on your mic as close as possible, and Shalom faded it by hand.
Oh.
Because there was no
maybe that's
talent.
why we talked about it, because we couldn't figure out how they did that.
That's probably right.
And there were tons of people around town being like, "Oh no, they were playing the tapes, man. Oh no, they were playing the tapes, man. Oh no, no, that wasn't them, dude. No one can do that."
Yeah, that's they rehearsed the shit out of it, and they had Shalom, who's really obsessive about sound. I mean, like he's a savant.
Oh, dude, yeah.
And that's exactly like if they had pulled away from the mics at slightly different speeds, like, that would make Shalom crazy. And it would have made Andy and Roger crazy. And so they were like, stay on that fucking mic.
Yeah.
And Shalom will make sure that we all fade properly.
Wow.
Yeah. And they were, were on every detail like that.
Right. Hang on a second. My phone is ringing. 'Cause I have another. So there's a part. Speaking of backing vocals and the Spilt Milk tour, there's a part that for me turns into a horror story, and it really gave me like sweaty palms because I can do regular harmonies and stuff, but like when you get into Beach Boys and stuff, I'm in a band where we have to do all that kind of shit, and we've done Queen shit. And our guy, he goes home and he records a version of the song, or not records a version, but puts the actual track underneath, and then in Pro Tools like sings your part, whatever it is, and it's slightly above the regular thing, so you see where it is in context, just like Roger would do with them with their tapes.
Right.
But that whole thing about like not actually singing an actual like third all the way through a song or fifth, like just random fucking notes, whatever you sound good singing, and then you have to learn that made me like that. It was like it's making the hair on my arm stand up because of just the terror I feel inside of having to learn that and do that. I don't know how the fuck they did that, man.
It wasn't fun, I think, when it comes down
No,
to
and
it.
that's the main thing that I got from Jack, because the other guys I was always too scared to talk to about it because I thought I'd blow whatever thing was happening at the time. Yeah. But with Jack, I had plenty of time, and really he was like, man, you have so much more fun doing what you do than those dudes. Like, you don't know how little, like, there was no fun. It was just bummer. Like, it was a bummer.
Right.
And I guess,
No, I think that's right. It was, they were so serious and so focused, and the result was, like a fantastic product, but it wasn't, at all joyful. I mean, like, whatever joy they had ended up on the tape and nowhere else.
Yeah, and the joy was for us, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andy said that, on the tour and during practice, like, Tim would walk around, like, singing his fucking crazy melodies for whatever the songs were just all the time.
Sure.
Because they were so random. He would just, like, constantly practice them so that they were in his head. And the first person who I had heard it from was Linus Dotson, who goes by Linus of Hollywood. And he's a producer and songwriter and singer, and like also pretty great in his own right. And when Roger toured his solo albums in Japan, Linus was his bass player.
Okay.
And that was what maybe he wasn't the first person, but he was the person who like made it. That was the point where I was like, I get it. And he was like, Linus was like, yeah, I mean, like, I could listen to a song and pick out a harmony part and sing it. That has nothing to do with what Roger had me doing. It was like, It was crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah. And it's part of, like, it's a I think a particular gift of Rogers to be able to kind of visualize or audialize, how each of those voices was gonna play on each of those notes, and then, dice his songs up into these like crazy fucking things, knowing that at the other end it was going to come out right.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah, that is just weird. In some ways, I mean, you saw them live as well. I mean,
I didn't see them.
Oh, you didn't see them live.
I've
shit.
seen a whole lot of tapes.
Yeah. Well, you saw those tapes. I mean, he was right in some ways.
Yeah. No, he nailed it. I would say if I had to pin their sort of live magic to one thing, which would be ridiculous and unfair, I would say it was probably those vocal arrangements.
Oh yeah.
Because I think that's probably why they sounded so unique. Because I think, like, when you hear, I've heard lots of bands with good harmonies, but I think when you have everybody kind of moving in step like that, your brain sort of separates. Like, all right, this is this guy, this is this guy. And I think listening to Jellyfish, your brain couldn't do that because he couldn't track any one singer except Andy.
Right.
And I think probably that was part of the transcendence of just like, I can't even, this sounds so great and I have no fucking idea like how this is, like I can't take it apart in my head, and I think that's probably just magical.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever tried to play drums standing up?
No, I can't even play drums while sitting down.
There was a few dudes around town during that time that started standing up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So silly.
Yeah. I think it worked real well for Andy, and I guess there were the guys who inspired him, who apparently were pretty good at it, but largely it doesn't seem like something you should set out to do.
No, it worked for a guy like Slim Jim Phantom from the Stray Cats.
Right.
That guy's rocking. So, okay, so you finished this book. Now you've gotten some distribution. It's going to get out. Do you think you'll be able to go out? I saw you did a reading and a signing at a record store. Do you think you'll be doing some more of that?
No. I mean, like, I would say I would love to. I think the signings really need to pay for themselves, or at least like kind of pay for themselves. Like, and the fact of the matter, like, there's, I did one here in Portland, so that, there was no risk there. And then I did one in LA, and LA, has the highest concentration of Jellyfish fans in the world.
Yeah. They saw them a lot, knew them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, have worked with them since. Yeah. And so there was a good crowd there. And I think, maybe I could pull something off in San Francisco. Austin might not be insane, like that. But even like my family's in New York, and when I go home, I've never made any effort to book something there, because I think it, I know who I've written about, and and I know that there are not throngs of people.
Right. But I mean, to me, they're kind of like the big star of our generation,
mm-hmm.
Or at least of mine. Yeah. I don't know how old you are, but to me, they're our big star.
I think that's right. Well, I think they're in that category.
Yeah.
I think about this a lot, actually, and in particular, as the book heads towards distribution, we're writing promotional materials. Like, that's sort of the way I've framed it. To, as I think about like bookstores buying stock, most of them are not going to be all that interested in Jellyfish. Most of them are not going to have any background. So I've been trying to figure out how to frame, like, why would you want this book? And that seems like the best hook, is like, Jellyfish is one of those bands.
Yeah.
And they are one of those bands, and I'll like stand by that. And I think like Big Star, I don't know, Big Star is special, I think. And, and I think about like Uncle Tupelo, and Uncle Tupelo like launched a genre.
Right.
And so like, I think Jellyfish were great. And there's a way that they're influential, but not necessarily foundational.
Yeah.
And I think other people would argue that they are. And, I hope those people make that argument really successfully. Like that would be, I would love for that argument to be accepted.
Right.
And I'm not sure that I'm the guy who can pull it off, but yeah, they are definitely our generation's hidden gem that, they just refuse to die, those records just keep coming back and back and back, it's great. And I think really telling, when you think about all the records that came out in 1993, not many of them are getting reissued, and that for good reason. And so that, whatever. Yes, I largely agree.
Yeah.
I might take some issue with Big Star specifically, but then maybe there are generations, Emmett Rhodes or
right.
whatever,
right.
Yeah, but there's certainly somebody special.
I like that you did the triumvirate of that era's power pop was Matthew Sweet, Jellyfish, and the Posies. Mine would have been a little different. I think I would have thrown in Material Issue.
That's fine.
Instead of the Posies.
If I had to go with a fourth, it would be Material Issue. And and really that was Bruce's three.
Okay.
I think they're probably my three also in terms of kind of influence, not just in terms of their music, but like John and Ken from the Posies have played on like hundreds of other people. Like they've done so much other shit.
Yeah.
And Roger too.
And members of Big Star.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Good point. So I think because the Posies are kind of so active at the controls of so many other bands, I think like they get up there. But Material Issue also I think was really something special. Like since this has come out, I briefly kicked around a Material Issue book.
Oh, really?
Because there's a great story in there. And, it'd be a lot of, I can't say I think it would be a lot of fun to write because I think it would be horrible and sad.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be great to spend a lot of time with that music and
what did they make? 3 records?
From 4.
4?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think, I think they're wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. I got Belly Button, I want to say like maybe even a month before it came out because I was in a band I lived in Houston, but I was in a band that was being courted by a publishing company called Emerald Forest that I don't think is around anymore. But there was an A&R lady there named Kathy Waldman. And I think that they officed either in the same building as Charisma or something like that. But she was like, oh, you got to check out this band. And that was the first time I heard them. And I just kept listening to the tape. I remember my roommate came home and I was like, we're doing it wrong. We're doing it wrong. Listen to this. So, yeah, I'm so glad that you wrote this book. I can't tell you, like, as a fan and as I posted a photo of it like on my Instagram, and there was a good chunk of people that were like, "What the fuck is this?" Like, tell me this is real. I really thank you. You did a great service to a great number of people.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Matt, it really feels good when people say that, like for a couple of reasons. I think, like, one, as you know, like when you make something and you put it in the world,
yeah,
like you have no idea what you're, and especially like at this, I had spent so much time with this fucking book, and like and had read it so many times that I was like, I don't know what it's about. I don't know if it's any good. Like, I don't know anything about this fucking thing except that it's a collection of words bound up in pages. You know, there was a little tiny part of me that really was afraid I had written all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy 600 times.
Yeah.
And,
it's like no, go ahead.
So to have that validated is really great. You know, like that people are finding value. And then there is something really special about, you know, like I love the power pop community and feel very connected to it. And to have like that community sort of, you know, to have folks in the community like thank me for adding to it,
yes.
you know, or feel like I've contributed something to it.
Yeah, you did.
Is extraordinary, you know, like that's, and I think, you know, I don't know that I had articulated that goal to myself, but I'm realizing like that was very much something that I wanted to do, was to sort of like be part of the, not part of the cool kids, but like be part of the kids.
Yeah. 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 And contribute something to it. Like you're not just part of it. You're a guy that puts something back.
Yeah.
Hey, I have I'm just looking at this album. This friend of mine that was on the show, he's Mark Ford's son from the Black Crowes.
Yeah.
His name's Elijah Ford. Can you see this? Elijah Ford in the Bloom. I could send this to you actually if you email me your he's gave me a couple of copies, but it's a great album. I thought you'd probably like it. Yeah,
and if actually, I'd love to hear the stuff that you've
sure.
done.
You know what? I'll send you a care package. You can just email me your address, and I'll send you a little box of music.
I would love that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
That's actually also been a really nice kind of fringe benefit. Is I've been past like a bunch of like people have shared a lot of music with me, which is really great. I think. In fairness, I think there's a fair number of them that, like, because I'm the only person in public who, you know, admits to knowing Andy.
Right.
I think a lot of sort of like, you know, and if you happen to email it to Andy. Yeah. but I also am like very, very clear, like from the outset, like part of the reason my relationship with Andy works is that I, you know, am not an access channel to him.
That's how all those relationships work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I won't pass your thing around to all my Jellyfish fan friends. Like if anyone's like, you know, if anyone's like a super dork, like he left this out, can I call him and ask him on Skype if he No,
but certainly reach out through Facebook. I mean, like I've been loving talking to fans, and
I'll post links and stuff to your Facebook and everything on the in the text and stuff of this and on my Facebook and stuff.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I've been trying to make peace with the fact that like I don't know everything, and some people do. I think.
Yeah.
So a couple of folks have like asked me questions like really like impressively detailed, like, you know, Andy said in an interview once that blah, 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 blah. Do you know what happened with that? And I'm like, I have no fucking idea what you're talking about. I've never heard anything like that. In a different podcast, actually, somebody asked me a question and I was like, I've never heard of that. And then I guess Andy listened to it and he emailed me and he was like, here's the story with that. And explained.
Well, shit. Well, if you're listening to this podcast, Andy, hit me up because I would love to have you on, but I don't want to bother you. And also, I'm a little intimidated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
But he's a wonderful guy, and we still talk. It's a funny thing now that it's out, because I realize, like, until the day all these guys die, or I die, or both, like, I'm now their biographer.
Yeah.
You know, it's like such a funny thing, you know, like we're like connected now forever.
Yeah. You're the guy that wrote the book.
Yeah. That was funny. That actually happened in a discussion somewhere. Somebody was saying something about the band, and I was like, well, I don't think that's really how it went down. And And the guy was like, well, I really think something, something, something. And a third party was like, no, this guy wrote the book on them. Like literally wrote
the book. Yeah. Yeah. What a great feeling, man. You did a great job. And again, thank you as a fan.
Sure.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope we stay in touch. And seriously, email me your address and I'll send you some music and stuff.
Yeah, I totally will. I mean, I'm down for swag. Yeah, thanks so much for reaching out. I mean, like it was great to meet you and talk to you, and I love talking about the book and the band and and just kind of like I like being part of the community, and I like the community being alive and healthy. So so thank you for what you're doing in that sense.
Thanks, man. I enjoy
Sure.
I enjoy it. I enjoy being a musician and getting to talk to other people like yourself and other musicians. And figuring out how we all can put shit in this world where there once was nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well said.
Thanks for doing the show, man.
Sure thing.
All right.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Craig Dorfman, the man who wrote the book on jellyfish, Brighter Day, A Jellyfish Story. Go look him up on Facebook. Look up Brighter Day, A Jellyfish Story. Get this book. If you don't know jellyfish, now you kind of know their story. Maybe get out there and get their music and then get involved. Listen to some more jellyfish music. I love them. They're fantastic. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you, Craig Dorfman, for listening to the show. Hey, if you're new to this show and you started listening to it because Craig was on here and you know Craig, but you don't know me, I am a musician. I'm a music fan. I do this podcast because I love talking to my friends and my peers, making new friends doing this show. I put out, this is episode 536. So I've had a shitload of shows on here. You can hear everyone from Dwight Twilley to people you might not even know. People you might know like Alejandro Escovedo. People you might know like Frank Turner. People like Kathy Valentine. You know, a lot of people you might know, people you might not. All right? This has inspired me to reach out to the members of Jellyfish in some way. Anyone. Jason, Eric, Roger, Tim, Andy. If you are listening, my name is Johnny. I'm a huge fan. I would love to talk to you about you. Doesn't even have to really be about that much jellyfish. There has to be some jellyfish, but there doesn't even really have to be all about it. We can find out what you've been doing. I want to know what you're up to. I want to hear music you've done since then. I miss your voice. I miss Andy Sturmer's voice. I love his voice. I really fucking love his voice. I love his songwriting. I love his lyrics. I love the band. So thank you, Craig, for being the guy that wrote the book on jellyfish. That was weird what I just did, but it's true. It's true. I love them. And he did say that Andy might listen to shows. Or maybe listen to one. Maybe listen to this one. Andy, if you're out there, let's do this thing. All right, hey, thank you, Craig, for doing the show. Thank you, all of you, for listening. And go get this book, Brighter Day, A Jellyfish Story. All right? Maybe they'll get back together. You think they will? Have a great day, whatever it is you're doing. Bye.